Democrat Joe Biden has maintained his lead, widening the gap even further. The U.S. election is still too close to call. Now, to talk about how the race to the White House will impact the Philippines' growth path, we have Emmanuel Leyco, President of the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Good morning, sir. Great to have you here with us on the show.
Good morning, Prof.
All right, sir.
Sir,
Let's
I think you're on mute, sir. Okay.
Can you hear us, sir? All right. Okay. So first things first, maybe it would be best to ask you first honest assessment of how things are faring or how things are going in the U.S. elections. Is this largely expected? You have a Biden still maintaining that lead here. At the onset of the count, it was a very narrow lead, but this time around, you have him somehow widening that gap. Some reporting 246, 253, even some 264. So what's your honest assessment here, sir?
Sir, can you check your audio, please?
I believe Sir Emmanuel Leyco is trying to check on his audio at the moment. But, Dan, lots of developments here when it comes to the U.S. elections, of course. Earlier, before the broadcast, we did see Biden widening that gap. In fact, like what I mentioned earlier, some say 253, some say 264, but it's really still too close to call here. In fact, lots really hanging as well on how things will fare in the state of Nevada. The last time I checked, you have Biden just up by 0.6% there. And that, of course, carries 6 electoral votes. Now, should he win that together with the likes of Arizona and Michigan, once that's confirmed, then that is ultimately going to mean 270 electoral votes for a Biden. So really, lots of things. A moment of anticipation here, really, when we're talking about the U.S. election. Okay, I believe Sir is already back with us. Good morning, Sir Emmanuel Leyco about the Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Sir, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I am sorry about the earlier.
No problem, sir. It happens.
Too many buttons to push.
Well, talking about buttons to push here, let's talk about how the U.S. elections is faring at the moment. What's your honest assessment?
If we are to believe the polls going into these elections, a Biden win is not a surprise. But what is really surprising is how President Trump is holding up. And this is really going to be a concern for everybody. First, deeply divided American electorate is very much evident now. Going into the next administration, the problem would be for Biden to reunite the American people. And I think that is going to be a going concern, not only for American politics, but also for the American society as a whole. There are a number of issues that divide them now: racism, the Black Lives Matter, and then we have the white supremacists, right wing. It's deeply divided, and I think that should be the first order of business for whoever wins these elections.
And at the same time, the race to the White House is actually an impact, a repercussion beyond the U.S. Of course, we're talking about how it's going to affect global relations and even economically how things will fare for the likes of the Philippines. So what would a Biden or a Trump presidency actually mean for the growth path of the country here, especially when we're talking about that? You have, for the past few years, the Philippines has seen a pivot to China, and somehow there has been a more friendlier tie between Duterte and Trump compared to the likes of former U.S. President Barack Obama. So should Biden win, would that also mean a more souring relation with the U.S.?
I don't think so. I see the U.S. foreign policy more of a structured, institutionalized foreign policy, that it doesn't matter whether the president is a Democrat or a president is a Republican. I think the American interests are well defined, and that is what's guiding U.S. foreign policy. So, for example, in the Philippines, the interest of the U.S. is very clear. They want to maintain very strong relations with the Philippines in terms of trade, in terms of security, in terms of cultural ties. And did that change during the Trump administration? I don't think so. The Trump presidency is more of a characteristic, it's more of a presidency that reflected the character of the president. But did it change the ideology of the American president? I did not think so. I do not think so.
Sir, but jumping off on the point of Jess, stimulus is the main issue here, especially when it comes to global trade. So if you have a sure ball $2 trillion stimulus, if the Senate is democratically led, then that could lead to a huge impact on the GDP of the US, which could actually have, more on the demand side, for example, on our trade. Does that have an impact on our own industries, for example, where US is one of our biggest export partners?
Yes. I think the impact of the stimulus in the U.S. would be to strengthen its consumption, and therefore exports from the Philippines will have a better market, and therefore our factories, our industries will stand a better chance. However, the stimulus package has always been the bone of contention among the politicians in the U.S. The question is whether or not they will have enough to sustain the stimulus. They've been spending so much, but look, the U.S. economy grew in the last quarter, and I think that is what was not missed by many of the Trump supporters. That despite the pandemic, they were able to turn around. And I was really surprised that the Trump campaign, that the Trump performance in these elections really did a very strong showing. And I think in terms of the president's recent performance, that was not missed by many of his supporters.
Okay, so speaking of fiscal policy, let's focus domestically at least here. You have the 2021 budget already in the hands of the Senate. What's your take on how things are faring so far when it comes to that? Would that be enough to actually propel a recovery from the pandemic? At the same time, we're talking about, recovering as well from the effects of not just Typhoon Raleigh, but the past 2-3 typhoons, in fact, that have entered the country, causing much damage. And we're talking about agriculture and infrastructure. So that would the 2021 budget be actually enough to help propel the country towards a recovery path?
Okay, I think we have to look at the budget in terms of in two ways. First is that will it provide relief to the much devastated economy, to the much devastated population during this pandemic, and even during the last storm. Next is will it lead to recovery? I'd like to think that I'd like to go back to the structure of our economy. Our economy is a consumer-driven economy, and right now, people do not have enough money. People do not have money in their pockets, and therefore, if they don't have any money, consumption really goes down. And I understand that there are some showings, there are some companies who are showing strong indicators for recovery, but I don't think that would be enough. I think we need to do more in terms of putting money in people's pockets. And that's by way of more jobs, by way of our own stimulus package. Until then, I'm not sure we can see a recovery for our economy. We need to have a good showing. Yes.
Sir, but compared to the second quarter, have we at least improved, given the fact that the latest inflation print at 2.5% for October was higher than most economists have anticipated? This is actually a time where people are hoping for higher inflation. Does that actually not signal to you that consumption is picking up, albeit slowly? Should it be picking up more? And what is the catalyst for that to be happening, especially as we approach the December month?
I am not going to use inflation as an indicator of recovery. It could be used right now that inflation is picking up because there's not much enough supplies that the people can buy. Demand remains, but the supply is not enough. And that is why inflation is picking up. So I will take it with a grain of salt if we look at inflation as an indicator of anything right now.
Okay, and sir, how about monetary policy? That has been pulling its weight here during this period, and the idea is, the easing of interest rates at least, and even the triple R, allowing banks to lend and give to even property sector that's ailing, should spur consumption and should actually allow people to tap into more loans, and that loan should propel the economy. Are you satisfied with these policies, and do you see this having an effect right now, at least as we go towards the third and fourth quarters?
Partially, yes. I think monetary policy is a very strong instrument for the government to stimulate the economy. However, I go back to the main driver of the economy, which is consumption. If the people do not have money in their pockets, they will not consume. They will miss meals. They will forgo what they used to buy. And until then, that the consumer appetite picks up, the economy will have a very difficult time to recover.
Right, sir. And having said all that, how do you see us growing at least in the third and fourth quarter for the remainder of the year even, and how soon do you see recovery happening in 2021? Can you give us at least your projections when it comes to GDP, sir?
The 16.5% dive that we saw in our GDP growth rate is a very deep dive. I have not seen this in our history since we started recording the Philippine economic growth rates. So 16.5% will be a very, very strong challenge. I just wish that in the next few quarters that we pick up a little bit. And without the economy reopening, I don't think that will be a big possibility. However, we have to make sure that when we reopen, the healthcare protocols are observed. Because right now, we know that the economy is reopening not because COVID-19 infections is slowing down or has declined. It continues to increase, but we need to bring the economy back to life. And that is why we are reopening.
All right. Again, thank you very much for those insights. Great conversations with you, Sir Emmanuel Leyco, President ng Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much. Thank you.